Hi, I'm Kim. Often as a counsellor, we hear the client talk about the wrongs they've suffered at the hands of another person. It could be a parent talking about how their child is abusive or rude, or it could be a child talking about how a teacher is treating them differently, unfairly from others in the class. It could be a teenager talking about how one of their parents is mistreating them in some way. Or an adult who's perpetrated violence or has been accused of that, who only wants to talk about the wrongs they perceive they were done by the person they have treated badly. So in men's behaviour change work, we talk about collusion, and that is when the counsellor listens to a story of someone being wronged, and we just go into that and support and encourage that narrative being spoken about each time. Whereas what we really need to do is hear that story, which is going to come out anyway, and then shift the way we approach it to this kind of language. That must have been really tough for you when your wife said that to you. Or this must have been really tricky when your teacher made you sit outside for what other children were doing as well. Or as with a parent, you might say, look, this might make you feel quite uncomfortable when the child you've born and been looking after for so many years turns around and treats you in this way. So I would encourage the client to put their hand on their heart or their belly or both and tune into what happens to them in the face of these injustices as they perceive them. And so rather than encourage the narrative to be added to about this other person who we have no control over, come back to the client and talk about what's the effect of living with this teacher, this spouse, or this child, or being in a work situation with someone, and go more into how that client's body is responding. Then perhaps from there you might lead to conversations about, is this feeling familiar from your childhood even? Is this a sense of shame that you're feeling? What's happening? You might give them one of those emotion wheels and say, can you pick 2 or 3 emotions that might match up with how you're feeling? And then we might move on to a way of talking with self-compassion and say, yes, it's been tough living with my partner. Yes, I've sometimes done the wrong thing. And I know I can do differently. And these reactions I'm having, they are actually from my childhood. Or that's the kind of way we talk. Or say it's with a child in child counselling and their teachers treating them in a different way to other children in the class. We might say, my little body has to cope with being in a classroom full of people and a teacher who has all this power. Take a breath. It's not easy being a child in a school when these things happen. But I can look after myself and I don't have to go to bed feeling like I'm the victim, I'm the one that's mistreated. I can also say, is there part of me that is strong enough to manage this? Am I actually feeling I'm an okay person? And as a counsellor, that gives you more to work with, rather than the client bringing the repeated narrative about some external person that's not in the counselling room. And where do we go from there? I hope this has been helpful.